Through the ups and downs, we stand tall in this journey of growth. Day by day, through the ups and downs, we stand tall in this
Oh, that's
journey
really
of growth. Day by day.
Oh, there we go. Starting
Good
with
morning.
laughter again.
Yes.
Good morning.
Well, it's better than started crying, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. How are you?
Not what we're aiming for. But yeah, all good here. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Tired. Wednesday.
The
Wednesday.
usual.
Tired. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it when I get home on a
So
Wednesday and it's done. Wednesday's done.
what do you do on Wednesdays then? What's
Ponies.
Wednesdays for you?
Go and
Oh,
go
of
and
course
look
it is.
after
I say that.
ponies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like a dream day, Juliet. Don't you know what I mean?
It will be a dream
One
day
man's
when you
trash
stop
is another
doing
man's
it and
treasure.
everything. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is one of
It's
those
hard work.
things where you stop doing it and you miss it. It's hard work, but then
Mm.
when you stop doing it, you miss it. Definitely. Yes. So today, Juliet, I would like to grill you on, well, not grill you, but I'd like to give people, I suppose, an outlook on what it's like to homeschool your children
Okay. Maybe we
and
should
what
change
your
it to home
experiences are.
educate rather than
Oh,
homeschool.
is that what? Yeah. Oh, okay. Am I
Should we
using the
start
wrong
with the beginning?
terminology?
I think
You see,
that's
I'm
it.
I'm a trad I'm a trad school person, aren't I, with my child? So I don't know what the correct wording is.
Well, look, I don't
I'll let
really
you
care.
give an intro on what home ed is all
Mm,
about because it's your domain.
yeah, my notes actually say podcast on homeschool, so I'm no better, but I know that that's a thing because the point is it's not school at home.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
education
Which
otherwise,
is
if you like.
which was my understanding. Is I just thought you so from a person that doesn't understand home education, I basically thought that you take your children out of school, you decide not to go to school, because some people I do know that have taken their children out of school, and you basically follow along with the curriculum that they have in schools, but you do it at home. And that's that. That was my understanding.
And I think some people do.
Oh, so that you can do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, why not? But that's not how everyone wants to do it. And I suppose it's all determined by your reasons for your child not being in school in the first place, of which there's so many different reasons.
And what made you choose? So if we start at the beginning, then what made you choose to do home education with your children?
Well,
Because
I
you
tend to
started from
say
the beginning, didn't you?
no,
They've never been to a traditional school as
never been to a
such.
traditional school, but I would say that it wasn't what I chose. So when I guess we can take it all the way back to Ezra being little, and she didn't like to be away from me from the day she was born. Like she wouldn't let anyone else hold her. It was like severe separation anxiety, really, and I don't know if that was caused by something I did. She was obviously born like that, as all babies are, but whatever happened, anyway, she went to preschool and she went to a progressive school near us. They had a preschool, and I thought that was the right idea. I think in hindsight, it was a really bad idea for her.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, at the time, I was definitely swayed by all of their talk. You know, they talked the talk. I'm not sure they quite walked the walk, but if it was the preschool of a private school that went from preschool up to 18. And they still are very progressive. So there's no school uniform, teachers called by their first names. They're very creative.
No,
The
I remember
subjects they study.
when you took them there and thinking, wow, this is like, I'd never heard of anything like it, to be quite honest. Yeah.
Yeah. In hindsight, with Shiloh, when she went there was a bit of an incident at the school, which meant that everyone took their children out, and she didn't go back anywhere for a good 6 months. And then when she did go somewhere, she went to like a dirty little preschool. It was in a village hall. Everything
Sticky
was
fingers.
scummy.
They
Yeah,
sleep on the floor.
exactly that. But so we went from this place where they had all this tech and everything, very middle class, to this but it was beautiful. You know, the carers were so nurturing and lovely, and everything was just lovely about it. And I wish we'd put Ezra somewhere like that, because she was terrified, basically. And Ezra was always she was a child that was okay if I passed her hand to the teacher. So she would go from holding my hand to holding the teacher's hand, and then she was fine. So it wasn't that she would cling to me like Shiloh did. It's just I needed to pass her. I couldn't just
And
let
what
go and
age was
leave
she?
her.
What age is preschool?
3.
Right. So still tiny, isn't it? I
Yeah, she might
forget.
have actually been just under
3.
3. It was the September before she turned 3, actually. So she was 2, very nearly 3. Um, and so it was horrendous, because what they used to do at this preschool, at this progressive, fantastic preschool, not so fantastic, was give the kids a half hour playtime with the reception class and year 1, I think, potentially even up to year 2 of the infant school. And so they'd literally chuck them all out in the
So you've got these
playground.
little toddlers.
Yeah, which is fine for little toddlers who are excited by older
Compliment
children and
in and
happy to
out. And
play
yeah.
and just get on with it. But Ezra was terrified. And sometimes I used to hang around. She'd only go for kind of 3 hours or something. And so sometimes there was a coffee shop and I'd sit in the coffee shop. And every now and then I'd pop out at the playtime and I'd peer through the hedge like a psychopathic person. And maybe that's a bit extreme. Perhaps I shouldn't use that word. Like someone who was neurotic about their child. And see her screaming in fear, like crying and crying. And
Oh
I remember one
no.
day, like seeing her walk back to the classroom, and the teacher saying, "Go out," and she was saying, "I'm scared," and I just left her really. In the end, her friend joined, and I think she was much happier when her friend joined, and it turned out to be okay. But in hindsight, she shouldn't have gone there.
Yeah. And what
But
do you would you say that that kind of experience had a good, like, positive effect on her to make her, but like, or was she too young for that kind of experience?
well,
Did she
no,
talk about it now?
um, well, well, not really, but I learned then that I really didn't think. I think it wasn't that I learned she couldn't go into mainstream school. I think I realised that probably 5 full days a week wasn't going to be right for her. So we looked at all of the local schools, and there was
Mm,
I just had problems with all of them. Just things they said, like there were certain things I didn't believe in, and I just couldn't get past it with most of the schools. The only one
mm,
that I quite liked was actually the school that had more of the kids from the more deprived area going, which I live in. Farnham's a very middle class, affluent area where people are also a little bit snobby, and so
mm.
everyone wants their children to go to the we've got some of the best schools in the country, and everyone wants their children to go to those schools, and it's all about that. Whereas the one I liked was the one that was not really doing very well, and
Yeah.
for the kids from the deprived part of Farnham. But they combined both of their reception classes, so they had 60 kids in one classroom, and I just thought that wouldn't work for Ezra.
Mm.
But there was a school which was a kind of 30-40 minute drive away, called Inwards, which, have you heard of Krishnamurti, the philosopher?
I'm not sure. I think the only reason I have, I think, is because you've pointed me in their direction.
Okay,
Is this like the Steiner type? Is it a Steiner type?
well, no, it's not like Steiner. Krishnamurti was an Indian philosopher who has some, actually, in my opinion, great philosophies.
Mm,
I really like what he said, but I hadn't really heard of him before. It just so happened that the only Krishnamurti Centre in Europe is quite close to us, and they're a community. I'm not sure how I feel necessarily about that, but they have this small community which is, you can live there if you're up to age 35, and you can school there from age 14 to 18, but it's a boarding school, and it's quite a closed community. But they had
oh
this
no, this isn't
ha-
what I was thinking about then.
mm,
Yeah.
they had and have this little school which was literally in the middle of the forest, and it was 3 buildings, one of which was a straw, made clay straw building that they'd made, but it's beautiful, and 2 almost like shed type buildings, barns. And it was a school for children age 5 to 11, and it was originally, it was set up well over 20 years ago, and it originated as a play space for the children of the teachers and the older people and staff at at Brockwood Park, the Krishnamurti school. And it evolved into a school, and we found this place, and obviously you had to pay, so that was a thing we had to make sure we could do. But the key thing for us, as well as the way they taught, was that the children didn't have to go 5 days a week. And so we could send Ezra 3 days a week, and that was absolutely fine. And that fitted much. I didn't want her to not go to school. That was the point. That wasn't what I was seeking. I wanted her to be in school, but I just didn't feel like 5 days a week was right. And I didn't love the way of teaching in mainstream schools, and the importance they placed on certain things. So this was perfect. And she was there for nearly 5 years, and then there was a issue between the senior members of Brockwood Park and Inwards, which resulted in Brockwood Park asking everybody at Inwards to leave, and they, including teachers, and they did give us the option to reapply for our place there, but we chose not to. But still, so we left.
Politics in the schools.
Yeah. So that was in 2020. So the school shut.
That was, I remember.
Effectively shut as COVID hit. It was supposed to run to the end of that academic year, but COVID hit, so they said we'll just shut now, which was actually great, because unlike most people whose children were at private school, we didn't have to pay. So most people, their children went online or were at home, but they had to continue to pay, whereas we got out of that, which was quite good. I would have rather the school stayed, but it didn't. It did, just in a different way. And because I didn't want her to not be in school, we came together with some of the other parents, and we hired a village hall, and we hired some tutors, and they still went 3 days a week to some form of school, but it would have been officially home.
Was that you sort of instigating that and saying, look, come on, let's get stuff together and start doing it our way? And did you pick and choose the tutors that you had? Did you interview them and
that would have been a nice way to do it, but it wasn't actually that easy. It was quite hard to find tutors for a start, and it was also hard to find children. People didn't seem. It appeared that the kind of ex-Inwards people, lots of them moved away, actually moved to different schools around the country, or just sent their child to school.
But were they on the borderline of the home education because of the way that school was run, that they were at, or were they just looking for something different for their children to be in that kind of school in the first place? It must have been a move for them to then go into traditional schooling.
I think there were a lot of
given
children
their beliefs.
who were there were a lot of children who were maybe there because they struggled in school, not necessarily academically, maybe behaviour.
Just with the or is it with and with the constraints of traditional schools?
I don't know. But either way, our thing lasted for 2 years, and then that came to a bit of a natural. It got to the point where it was too hard work to continue it,
right?
Which was a shame, because that had kind of worked. But the one thing I would say is, when I was talking about Ezra with her need to have her hand passed over to a teacher, that continued all through Inwards. So even when she was at the school, and however lovely the school was, she still struggled there. Again, I think to some extent it might have been too free for her. She was never very good when given freedom. That's what terrified her. If she had direction and was given a task and told, you need to do this, she was able to do it. But as soon as someone said, go and do whatever you want, it just put her into fight or flight. And this school was a very free school. It was very do what you want. So in the mornings I would have to pass her hand over to the teacher, otherwise she would get upset. So that continued. It was only when we started doing the village hall thing that she found her confidence, and she felt safe there. And I think it's because she was there was almost never any free time, because there was only oh my goodness, I need to sneeze, hold on. Excuse me.
Oh, bless you.
Oh dear.
That's powerful.
Because they were down the microphone. Because there was only
you can mute.
yeah Sorry.
Chris Williamson wouldn't do that.
No,
Anyway.
I'm sure. Well, maybe his editor would cut it out. Perhaps our editor will cut it out. So, oh, where was I? Yeah, because there was only, say, 8 children or something at this little group, if that, and the teacher was just there focusing on them. There wasn't free time. Even the playtime was not really free time. They'd might go in the playground together with the teacher and play in a playground, or one other teacher would take them clambering up Mount Poppins, they called it, a big hill, and they'd
Oh
set
my
up
God, this
camp
sounds
and
so
stuff.
cute.
Yeah, so it was lovely.
I
So
want to go.
she thrived there. She really, even though it wasn't there, I mean, it was just a village hall that we chucked them in with a tutor, but she thrived, and that's where she really got her confidence. And it was the first time I saw her. There was no having to pass her over to the teacher. She'd kind of run in no problem at all. And so that was good, but obviously taught me that school wasn't the right place. Like taking her and dropping her off in a school wasn't the environment. She'd never been happy with that. And so and also having had that alternative education for 7 years, I wasn't. It just didn't feel right to put her into a mainstream school. I think rather than her continuing to expose herself, if you like, she would have been suppressed, especially the kind of character she is. I see it in her clubs that she goes to, that she's one of those overlooked childs because she doesn't say anything. She doesn't particularly shine, and she's not bad. She's just there and doing what she's told. So that's why we home educate, and Shiloh, I guess, just comes with it. I would look at them individually, and I do look at them individually, but Shiloh at the moment is very much keen to do what Ezra does, and it works. It works for both of them. I don't know how she was the child that also wouldn't. When I took her to preschool, she clung to me like a feral monkey, and when she went to the inwards, even where she'd been going since she
I
was
was going to say limpet. No, a feral monkey. That's
she'd been visiting
that's
inwards since
lovely
she
though.
was 2 years old. It's all she knew, and she was happy and safe there and content there. But on her first day, she was like feral and screamed at the teacher, "My mummy hates you." So she was very hard. Consider, when she was born, I thought I
Shut
was
up, your
like,
grass.
yeah. When she was born, I thought, oh, thank goodness. I had a sociable child who would run off and play with other children, who wasn't terrified of the world.
Oh, Shiloh.
But then suddenly put her in school, and she was literally like a feral monkey clinging to me. So it didn't really work out for her well either. And now they go to different groups and things because I still try to get them out of. I don't
Yeah, see,
want to be just sat in the
the
house.
thing. Like I learned about, like, obviously I knew that you were homeschooling, but I had a journey with somebody. I sound like a journey, not a spiritual journey, an actual physical journey with an old boss of mine to, unfortunately, a funeral of an ex-colleague. And we were in the car, and he was somebody I didn't know that well. So it was like, you've got to sit there for 4 hours driving to Manchester with your old boss who you don't
Yeah.
really know that well. You really haven't got a lot
Awkward.
to say to him. Yeah, very. But he was a lovely guy. Like, there was nothing like that. I just didn't really know him that well. Anyway, he started to tell me about the home education of his child, and he lives in Essex, and he was saying about the community aspect of it. And he said, we have a group of us, we get together, we do field outings, and we all meet up. He said there's about 20 of us that all get together, and I had no clue, and I didn't know this kind of community existed. And it was really, really interesting listening to what I wouldn't say he spoke about for the whole 4 hours, but he did go into a lot of detail about his experience with it. And I just had no clue. But he had 4 very young children, lived in the middle of nowhere, and didn't want them to go to traditional school. And they were thriving.
Yeah, there's definitely there's so much you can do now, and there's more and more popping up. Like I'm on some.
I don't know anyone else other than you, and obviously one of my old bosses. I don't really know anyone else, so this is why I find it fascinating.
I'm on a lot of groups, Facebook groups, for example, and continuously I'm being sent different things going on in different places. So many, the zoos, the theme parks, all of these places all organise home education events. I'm pretty sure if you had the money, you could go to something every day. There's people who organise world school events. So there's a lady who organises something in the Maldives every year where you can go for 2 weeks
I'll be
and do
signing up
all
for
of
that.
these activities. It's the financial side of it that's difficult.
So does it cost, to home educate, do you have to pay anything?
You
Like,
don't.
do you have to pay body, the exams, things like that, and
Yes.
assessments? Do you have to prove that you're actually doing something? Because I could be, because you do get a lot of it is you're on a radar in some instances from, say, social services, for example. If your child doesn't go to school, what are the consequences, and how do you prove that do you have to, is that's my understanding, but is that true?
Yes and no. So you don't ever have to register your child as home educated. This is how it currently
Right.
is. You don't ever have to
Yeah.
register your child as home educated. So if your child is not on the list, if you like, then
Yeah.
there is no list. So my understanding is if you didn't ever register your child for school or apply for any schooling, you're not on any list. I don't know that I'm
So you don't get
100%.
flagged as a
Well,
at risk type thing because you're
you
not.
you do if you're on a list. So we did apply for Ezra to start school just to see what school she would get into in case anything went wrong. At least she'd have a school place. And so my awareness is that she would be on a list because we applied for school through the council
Mm.
when she was 5 years old. When she went to Inwards, they would have had an obligation to tell the council that they had these children at their school. And we were told when Inwards closed that they had an obligation to contact the council and say these children have now left their school, which I think is the process for schools. If a child leaves, they have to contact the council and say the child has left.
Yeah.
The school was under a different county completely. So I don't know whether that message will have been passed onto our local council or not. But as yet, we haven't been contacted by them. So again, my awareness is that they kind of almost pick out of a hat who they're going to contact. And if you get contact
Right.
from them, you have to prove what you've been doing. So there is a
Which is, yeah.
commitment. I hope they don't come to me, not because I can't prove it, because I can prove everything, but that would be a
Yeah.
hell of a lot of work to put it all down onto paper. It's not a case of just like photocopying a few pages from a book and sending to them. It's like filling out a whole.
So they do a full audit basically on you.
Yeah. So I think that if you have any kind of level of care, maybe, I don't know, but you as a homeschooling parent, home educating parent, you probably want to make sure you can prove that your children are doing some kind of education, but it doesn't have to tie in with the national curriculum.
Okay,
So
see, this is what I thought.
yeah,
You had to home educate your children. You had to meet obligations, that you would do the national curriculum and fit into timelines of assessments and things like
no.
that, of
So
what level your children are at. For I don't know why. I suppose because that's how I was assessed as a child, and my daughter. So I presume that's what you'd have to do.
actually, even private schools don't have to.
I didn't
So
know
when
that.
I was talking about the one that they went to for preschool, the progressive one,
There's Ofsted, isn't it? Ofsted is the
yeah,
body. Yeah. And
yeah.
so
So
they
you
don't have
don't.
that. Private
They
schools don't. Oh no,
private
because they're not
schools.
funded, are they?
No, private schools don't have to follow the national curriculum. The national curriculum
Yeah.
is the kind of standard that state schools have to follow. I would imagine some private schools do follow the national curriculum. I struggle to say that word. I think some private schools do probably follow it, but they
Yeah.
don't have to. You're
I
right. It's
did not know this.
Ofsted decides whether a school is
Yeah.
doing a good enough job, not and that will be based on what they're teaching the children. But as long as the children are getting a wide, good enough education, it's okay. So it would be the same for home education, as long as your children are getting an education. But it doesn't have to be maths, English, science, history, geography. You know, it's
Right.
just showing that you are active in a learning process with your children. And there's a thing called unschooling, which is where people
I think I
do
need that.
nothing. They literally follow their children's desires 100%
Wish
of
I'd
the
done
time.
that. Yeah.
Well, I don't.
Like exploring what they're interested in.
Yeah, but
See, I think my daughter would have just laid in bed all day.
and some do.
I actually do think she would have done that.
Yeah, and some do. And the parents have the belief that by allowing them that time, they'll eventually kind of get bored of it and want to
Like a
learn.
butterfly in, like a chrysalis. All of a
Yeah,
sudden they'll jump out of bed one day, Mother,
yeah, exactly that.
I've
That they'll
decided what I
find
will
that.
be.
Yeah, like meditation. You know, they just sit there and think, and eventually they'll.
Yeah, that's
I.
it.
Yeah, I'm not brave enough to do that. So no, you don't have to follow the national curriculum. You do have to prove to the state that your children are educated if they come to you. There's a new law that they want to pass, which, to be honest, I really haven't looked into, though some people are being really proactive in challenging it. And I
Yeah.
feel, I'm just putting my head down and carrying on and doing that awful thing where I let other people fight for me. But so I don't really know what it says, but I believe it's something along the lines of, if you home educate your child, every home educated child will be on a list, and you will have to regularly prove what your child is
Do
doing.
they can't even monitor the schools that they've got at the moment, so the
Exactly.
chances of them doing that is going to be very minimal, I'd expect. Well, I heard from somebody else, that they've made it mandatory that children stay on school from the age of 16 to 18 in state schools, but they can't actually police that because they do not have the data or the methods to be able to police that. So although they say you've got to stay on, they can't. There's no way of them being able to check that.
Exactly that. And that's where to be honest, I've got nothing to hide. I can happily prove
Yeah.
that my children are, but it would be a big effort.
Also, why should you?
And there's well, yeah, although to some extent I think part of their point is that there are children who are potentially in abusive or dangerous
Yeah.
situations, potentially
Yeah,
caring
that's
for
what I
parents and
completely,
things like
yeah.
that. So,
And the
there
schools are
are,
where some of this stuff is picked up. So if you're not in a school system, then you're, and particularly if you're a child at risk, they're not going to know about you because you're not in the school system.
yeah. And for some children, school is their only safe place. And if they're being
Yeah.
withheld school,
Yeah.
so I think it's
Yeah, there's pros and
ignorant.
cons when it
Yeah.
comes to,
It's ignorant to say we shouldn't have to do this just because we're all doing it fine, when there are children
yeah.
who are in a situation where they're being neglected
Yeah.
and the parents are writing it off as home education. So, where do you go with that? I don't know. But currently, as it stands, you don't have to prove anything.
Yeah. And what would you say that because I know that your children do socialise with state school children, don't they?
Yeah.
And do you notice any remarkable differences in them at their, I suppose, their socially more than anything? I think I'd expect to see differences, like as the way that they interact with each other. And I know you said about tech as well, because your children don't have phones, and there's that aspect of it. What's the experience there with them socializing with traditional
Mm.
schooled children?
That's an interesting one, because I think that it's such an individual thing. There's not a divide between it, from my perspective. There's not a divide between home ed kids
Yeah.
and school kids in the slightest. It's based on the child and their own personality. So they do socialize with children who are in school. Those children are children that they've known since they were born. so that makes a difference. They're their close friends. Ezra in general is very reserved, and she won't go and really chat to anyone anywhere, and even when she does, I've never really noticed her finding any kind of common ground with anyone. Her
And do you think
interest.
that's her personality rather than her
Yes.
the fact that she's
Yes. And
her
her interests,
individuality?
yeah, her interests are quite unique. So we've talked about it, not on here, but she's interested in growing flowers, for example, and likes to spend time in her greenhouse doing that. And she's interested in her herbal courses that she does. But actually, in terms of her interests, that's not what she wants to talk about. She's interested in, she just likes being active and doing stuff. So when she sees her friends, she wants to play. She wants to um she wants to play. That's what she wants to do. She's not a sit down and chat kind of person. She's not really interested in gossiping and things like that. And so I do notice a struggle for her now with a lot of her friends, or not a lot of her friends. She doesn't have many friends her own age, and the friends she does have her own age mostly now have phones. And the problem is, she says, when she's with them, they just want to sit there and scroll their phones. So they do that sit in silence, scrolling their phones thing.
Yeah, so
She
it
doesn't
must
have
be
a
quite an
phone.
observant thing from her point of view, isn't it?
Yeah, it's boring for her. She's like, I don't want to just sit while they scroll a phone. And she doesn't really want to scroll a phone either. That's not actually what she wants to do. So she's
No,
not saying, can I have a
no.
phone to sit and
It's
scroll
not like
on?
she's missing out. She's just like, oh, come on, there's stuff to do.
Let's go and do.
Yeah.
She wants to go and do stuff. So most of her friends now are a couple of years younger than, a year or two younger than her, and they are home educated kids that still want to play as well.
Mm.
And then Shiloh is slightly different in that she's very sociable and can have a conversation with anyone about anything, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
interest her. So she'll chat to people, but she'll also get involved. She'll be looking over their arm, watching the screen as well. Whereas Ezra just doesn't really have an interest. So I
Yeah.
don't think there's any difference there between home ed and school. I think it's just
Right.
the
Yeah.
children. But I do notice that home educated children, most it's not true actually. I do know home educated children who just want to sit in front of a screen, but the children that they hang out with that are home educated are children that will play.
And do you think that the because I noticed, I mean, I had to move Sean's school at a critical age because of things that were going on, and the mental health aspect of children. Do you think that you notice that in a fact that you're protecting their mental health by home education rather than them being in a school that's not built to let children thrive, really?
Yeah, I do. And I don't, this
I'm very
probably,
anti-school for anyone that's listening.
yeah. Well, I also probably, like you to an extent, have clients who, I have a very few, but occasionally I have clients who are teenage girls in school
Yeah.
struggling with school, not the academic side of it,
Mm.
but the dynamics. And I've heard so many teenage girls say things like, "Oh, I don't have any friends," and I think, "What? Like,
Yeah.
wow, that I don't understand that."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
but having said that, I run a girls group. Um, for it's not for home educated children. It just happens to be on a Friday morning, so it's only home educated children that come, and it's for young girls. It's a mentoring for young girls group,
Mm.
journey of a young woman. It's called. It is the training I did anyway. And one of the girls sat there the other day and said, I don't have any friends. Well, I know for a fact that all the girls sat in that group, she plays with, she goes on trips with, she
Yeah.
hangs out with.
What's her definition of a friend?
Yeah, so I wonder if children these days are a little bit confused about what a friend is to some extent. But that might just
Mm.
be the children I'm seeing, because I'm sure there's, I do see other children. Actually, I've just thought of another friend, one of my school friends who lives near me, whose daughter is in between Ezra and Shiloh's age, who they both get on really well with, and she's been in school from day one, and she's very mainstream where that's concerned. She's
Yeah.
got friends. She's not one of these children who sticks out. She's amongst the group. She's with the friends. And her, Ezra and Shiloh get on really well, and they have a great time together. It's a little bit screen focused, but it's not so bad that it's a problem. So yeah, there's no problem. And Ezra as well, she has known her since she was born, or since the friend was born.
Yeah.
And she says, she talks about her friends and seeing her friends and stuff. So I don't know what that's all about, but I do feel like if they were in school, Ezra would be just overlooked. She'd probably be fine. She's very confident and she's very secure. And she'd probably go into school and do school and then come home and not really think about it. But I don't think she would be given the space to shine. And she certainly wouldn't be given the space to explore her interests, which are very outdoorsy. Shiloh, I think, would be molded into an absolute nightmare. I think she would, she would be led. She would be led by the. She would want to follow the gang and keep up with the Joneses, and I think that would be difficult for her. Well, I don't know that it would not so. That isn't so much my. It's more the pressure that would be put on her to do that.
Yeah,
she would put on herself to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I see that happening with her very occasionally in certain situations, but most of the time, she's building a confidence in herself.
And do you think that this kind of education and this has kept your family unit close as well? Do you think that's been an important factor for you being close as a family and not having your children away from you for such a long time, and also not being away from your children?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I don't know if other people would perceive that as a positive thing. For me, it's just a thing. But definitely, I'm sure that by 13 and a half, I was breaking away a little bit. Whereas Ezra's the complete opposite of that. Again, though, that might just be her personality.
Yeah. And also the world's changed a lot.
The world has changed.
The stuff that we would have maybe been doing then was not the kids just wouldn't be doing these days. Sean was very homebound. She didn't really, I was out tearing it up at that sort of age, but she was very much, I just was out all the time, but she very much wanted to be at home. So I think maybe there's not the things, or that the kids don't have the same interests because of the screens, maybe.
I think a lot of stuff like that is the way it is. They socialise by sitting on their screens, talking to each other in different places. And we did that. I did that a little bit. I'd talk to my friends on the phone all evening.
Yeah, you see, I didn't. I used to be out with them at the park, drinking cider.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong. It wasn't much after 13 and a half that I was doing that. But I didn't tend to hang around in the park because I lived in a village away from, not close to my school. And so my friends were not within walking distance.
Yeah.
Which I think made a difference. But
yeah, and I suppose Sean's age group, they were just on the cusp of social media. So it wasn't a massive thing. I think Instagram was like the photo sharing thing, and that was pretty much it. And you could send texts. I don't think WhatsApp was even a thing then. So it was she was just on the edge of that. So now it's obviously you've gone haywire. But then, we were talking about, I don't know where we were talking about this, but saying about pen pals and things like that. So is having, the social media aspect now and the communication side of things, is that just not the pen, if you not monitor it, but if you educate them on it can be useful?
Yeah, I sometimes think that more emails
With connection.
though. but think how quick it is. So there's only so much to tell somebody. And if before you'd write a letter, it would take you like a while to write the letter.
Oh, did you ever
Everything.
used to? I remember one of my friends when I was at school, she moved to Australia, and me and my friend Natalie used to get together and we'd record tapes and we'd talk on tape recorders, and like 60-minute, you had 30 minutes either side. And this was after Christ for anyone listening. So
this was like voice noting. Old-fashioned voice noting.
Yeah, but this was voice noting. This was and you'd record, and I remember, and then we'd package it up and we'd post it to Australia, and she would get it probably 2 weeks to possibly a month, if I remember rightly, later, and then she would then, because you couldn't afford to phone Australia, right? In the early 90s, and then you would. Because that would just be, you didn't phone
Who
Australia.
was this?
I don't even know if you could. A school friend. She didn't exchange things. Her parents, basically, I think that maybe her dad was a teacher, or he was in some profession that they wanted in Australia. So they did a straight house swap. She lived in Australia for a year, and then in someone's house, and they moved over to her house, and then they swapped back.
So then you reconnected when she came back.
Yeah, she came back to school. But yeah, she, with an Australian accent, it was very strange. But but yeah, we used to record tapes of what we'd been up to, because it was like this friend group that we were part of, and we'd record tapes. So yeah, back in the olden days before that was a good 2-month turnaround.
Yeah, exactly. So you had something to talk about. Now it's a 2-second turnaround, and so I think you can either go down.
I still have a lot to say.
I have a lot to say, but I realised this the other day. So I talk to, the only person I really talk to on the phone is Philippa, regularly, I mean. And we don't really see each other, but we see each other a couple of times a year, but we'll talk on the phone a few times a week. And we talk out of, we don't talk when we have something to say, we talk when we can talk. And so I've noticed a little bit of a pattern that if I've run out of things to say, I might move into some kind of rant or moan about something that probably isn't actually a problem, but it's almost like just filling the time, just finding something to talk about, rather than saying, actually, I've got nothing to talk about now, let's end the call. And that can be quite toxic.
Yeah. But then is that what you'd, if you were in person, would you talk like that? Is it more the fact of the distance?
Well, if you're in person, we might be doing something, so there'd be less talking.
Yeah.
We would be talking, but it would be interjected with what we're doing.
And do the girls, I know they don't have, obviously, we started onto this about them not having phones, but do they talk to friends on telephone? Do they, because obviously I know they don't have phones, but how do they communicate with their friends if they don't, like we were saying, we had phone, like we would use landlines, say, or I'd obviously be at school, or you were at school as well, weren't you? So you'd make arrangements with your friends at 13 to, we're going to meet down the park after, and things like that. How does Ezra communicate with her friends, or is it for you?
She doesn't really, and that is something that I don't worry about it, but it's on it kind of is there in my mind, because exactly like you say, I was probably calling friends and making arrangements and stuff at that age, or at least shortly after that anyway.
Phone boxes we'd use. Phone boxes were a good one. Meet you at the phone box, and then you could ring the phone box if you were going to be late.
Yeah, exactly. Most of their friends are joined. All of their friends are joined, really. And Shiloh tends to naturally gravitate to children a little bit older than her, and Ezra children a little bit younger than her. So they kind of meet in the middle. Nearly all of their friends are in between their two ages. I would say Shiloh's not really got any friends her age, and Ezra's not really got, other than these friends she's had since birth, she's not got loads of friends her age, but they've got a lot of friends that are kind of 11, 12. And so they've got one friend who moved from not too far away from us to a bit further away, so they don't get to see so often now, and they have a little WhatsApp group with her on my phone. So they have a separate WhatsApp channel to what I have with the mum, and they'll message her.
Yeah.
And in fact, she did phone them the other day, and they didn't. And my phone was switched off, so she left a message. But they could, they FaceTime her occasionally.
Yeah.
I think they're less interested in talking on the phone. I think they get on the phone and they're a bit like, I haven't really got anything to say to you.
Yeah, it's not normal to them, I suppose, is it? It's more they're an in-person
Yeah,
people, aren't they?
they have a friend who has tried to FaceTime them in the past. When they've got this friend that I mentioned before, when she sees them, when they see each other, she'll then go through a phase for a few days afterwards trying to FaceTime them. But again, they're like, what are we going to say to you? Like, we haven't really got
Yeah.
anything to say. Because it's that gossipy, it's that
You're
age
right,
where
yeah.
it starts to get into that, and they're just not interested. But I worry about Ezra. I have worried about Ezra getting left behind in that, all of her friends start going out and doing these things, but actually she's not bothered. She's not interested. And I
And
think,
also
why
she'll
force her into
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Or why
yeah.
worry
Not
about
everyone
something
wants
that's
to
not
be
even
around.
actually that healthy?
She's not worried about it.
She's not worried about it. Exactly. I think that's something that for me, I don't know if everyone feels like this, every home educator. This is probably just my kind of fear of what others think. But something that I find quite difficult is when other people question. I mean, you've been questioning all morning, but from a different viewpoint, question things, because I think what people don't realize is that, and maybe you experience this in other areas of life, but I've got quite strong opinions and beliefs based on the research I've done and the evidence I have for things. But it doesn't mean that I'm not pulled by society's expectations and the judgments of other people. And so something that I find quite hard is to stay solid with my own opinions and my own beliefs. No, I don't find it hard to stick with them, but I find it really, really uncomfortable when other people are doubting them and other people are questioning me on them, because my
But
natural
do you think that's
way.
for a lack of understanding and they don't want to listen to what it's all about? Or do you just feel it's an intrusive question to be asking somebody about their choice in home education?
No, I feel it unnerves me. It makes me
Ah,
worried. It makes me worried because I'm going against the grain.
hmm.
And
I think now it's more common than anything, and I wish I had uh, your thought pattern in following this through when Sian was younger, because she did not fit into the school system in the slightest. So for her, I think it was a complete waste of time, her going to school, in all honesty.
yeah,
So
it's
I think if
easy
anything,
when
people
someone
should
says
be
that.
taking note of what you're doing, rather than and being more, I suppose, being more questioning of it and understanding it a bit more. And I get that not everybody has the luxury. People have to go to work, but I think now more and more there is the option of you being able to work remotely and to fit your life around if you want to, if you don't agree with the school system, because it's a system.
Mm. Yeah, for me, it's quite hard in life in general when I do something because I know it's the right thing, but it
Mm,
doesn't fit in with society's expectations. And I think it can look like I'm just like totally cool with what I'm doing, but actually
but it's
internally,
difficult.
I'm
Mm,
I'm it feels really uncomfortable. It feels right, but uncomfortable, if that makes sense. It's
yeah,
scary.
yeah.
It's difficult to go against the grain. And I think when people go
Mm,
against the grain and do different from other people, everyone just thinks that they find that easy. I don't think people realize that it's really hard to stick to something you believe in
yeah,
when everybody is telling you, even if they're not saying it to your face, indirectly they're telling you by doing
yeah,
different that you're doing wrong, or they don't agree
yeah.
with what you're doing. It's very hard to stick to your own beliefs. Um, and so that I find quite
And
challenging.
what keeps you going with this? What's your inner compass that keeps you on track with doing this and not giving in to society's expectations of putting them into a mainstream?
Well, I think it helps when I hear people talking negatively of their experiences in school. Not that I want to hear that, but it reminds me. And the fact that the kids are happy, they say they don't want to go to school.
Yeah.
And
I
Ezra
think
even,
that is the main thing, is that your children are happy and thriving, and that's what you want. You know,
yeah,
the absolute awfulness that I had to go through with Sean at school whilst trying to work as well, was just absolutely horrific, and I would never want that on anyone else's children. And I think it happens an awful lot, and unfortunately, I think a lot of parents don't necessarily listen to their children when they're trying to tell them that things are like that, or they, you know, they're just like, well, get on with it, you know. Like some of the kids that I've worked with have, you know, when I've said to them, you know, you explain to mum blah, and they're like, oh no, she just laugh at me and just tell me, because, and it's not, this is no throwing any shade on the parent. It's because their experience in school was, you got told off because of this and whatever else, and therefore that's I can
yeah,
understand how the parents are like that, because they don't know any different. But perhaps if you sat and listened to your child, you might actually think a bit differently about how they're being treated in the school.
yeah. Lots of people just say, well, that's what happens in school.
Yeah, they accept it. But
And
perhaps if they didn't,
you've got to deal with it in life. So why
mm,
not? So
yeah.
start dealing with it now type. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think so. I
Which
think,
now, as I've evolved in my belief system, I'm like 100% behind you, and the way that you've, you know, that you've uh, managed the schooling, or not the education, should I say, not the schooling.
yeah, on the
Yeah,
flip side, it is probably important to remember that there's so many aspects to it. There's the financial side of it. I mean, we
yeah,
spend probably,
yeah. What's the
maybe,
cost? What are you paying for?
well, we pay on a Monday, they do an online school, which we pay for. They do maths, which is actually in alignment with the national curriculum maths, but
Right.
we have to buy all of the workbooks for it. They're not expensive, but it's still a thing.
Yeah, I remember the
Um,
cost of the you know, the books that you had to buy for them to do revision, that I doubt Sean even looked at, but they were very expensive.
yeah, on another day they do a
Never
group
mind times two.
that they go to, and we have to pay for that group. Um, we do the ponies, which we have to pay for. Um,
Mm.
they go to another another couple of groups which we have to pay for, and then they do the
Yeah.
normal after school clubs, like Ezra does lambda, Shiloh does dancing.
So
They
would you say that the entrance point for this isn't for everybody?
I think that you can probably do stuff a lot cheaper than we do it if
Right.
you just, but then you've got
Like, is home education a privilege, would you say?
I think it probably is. I think
Yeah.
could you do it for free? Well, not certainly not once you get to, well, okay, there's so many ways of doing it, and yeah, you probably could do it
Yeah. You
significantly
could
cheaper
find a
than we do
way,
it.
but the way that you do it
Yeah,
is yeah.
and then you could spend even more money than us and have an even, like I
Yeah,
would,
yeah, this is what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
was people
spectrum
have
of
tutors,
cost.
and tutors I was looking at a tutor for one of them, and they're, you know, like 50, 60 pounds a session, which is in alignment with therapy. That's what it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
less
yeah,
than
yeah.
what I charge.
It's not that's not an unreasonable, in my head,
Not at
charge for
all.
a tutor. Yeah.
But if you needed to have three,
Actually,
four of
yeah, I did
those for
pay for
different
Sean had a
subjects,
tutor. I can't remember how much I used to pay for her. And that was a long she did have a tutor for some point. I can't remember.
but if you took,
Complete waste of money, but yeah.
so maybe Ezra will do 5 GCSEs, maybe. So if she needed to
Mm,
have a tutor for all 5 GCSEs, that's like 300 quid a week. And if you do that for two
yeah.
children, you're paying 600 quid a week
Yeah.
just on tutors. Then you have to pay for the exams yourself, the GCSEs,
Oh,
which
do
are a
you?
few
You have to pay
£100s
for,
per exam.
because they have to have somebody come round, and do you have to be invigilated in your home?
Yeah. I mean, for two children, you could probably easily find yourself spending a couple of £1,000s a month, which is not too far off private school.
Oh, I didn't realise. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
we don't spend that. but we don't spend that, and B, I'm talking like 2 children doing GCSEs. Unless you've got twins or 2 very close together, you're not going to be in that situation either.
Yeah.
And you can send them to group. There's classes, but if you've got a child who's academically thriving, then they might not need anything at all. They just read a book and be done with it. But I had a client who did her GCSEs. She was not in school because she was unwell, so she wasn't doing school. Decided to do her GCSEs just before GCSEs and did them all herself in 4 months and got all like the top grade. But I don't think every child could do that.
No. So what would you say to parents, if there's any parents that are maybe their kids are coming up to school age and they're considering it? Because I do think a lot more people are talking about it now. Before it was like you had one kid that was home educated. I'm talking in my sphere. It was it just didn't happen. But now I think it's more, since obviously people were during COVID, people were having to do this and maybe saw that it wasn't as difficult or as unreachable as they maybe thought. Like, what would you say to people that are sitting on the fence about it at the moment? Would you recommend it? You don't have any regrets, basically.
I still would like it if there was another option like there was when Ezra first started school. I think they really enjoy when they go to the couple of groups that they go to for the whole day, and they're away from, it's not being away from home, but they're with their friends in a nice environment, doing fun stuff, kind of having entertainment provided for them the whole day. It's a learning environment, but they're not having to just think of games to play with each other.
So sort of a half and half thing.
A hybrid
for you
approach,
would be,
I think, is what works really well. And I don't know what will happen as Ezra she's already would be in year 8 at school, and the clubs that she goes to right now, the groups that she goes to that she really enjoys are up to age 11 or 12, and she's 13 and a half. And she keeps going, not because of the stuff that she's learning, but because she enjoys the environment. But I'm sure there's going to come a point where she actually needs to be spending more time on her academic work, and there isn't time for that. And then I worry slightly about whether she'll still be having fun, because there won't be any of that time.
But do you think maybe that's a part of the course that you have to do for knuckling down for a bit and doing some harder work? Or do you not want that? Or do you think that's not what it should be about?
Well, it's only on talking to you right now that I've just had the awareness that really it would probably only be for 2 years, because the next step, most home educated children, I think, end up at college. They don't home educate for A levels as well. They go to college.
I wasn't sure if they even were considered A levels or anything like that, or if that was the end of it for them, and then they went out and did amazing things. Or
no, I think
are there any statistics or anything on home educated children and what kind of professions or work that they do afterwards, or what their pathway is after?
There must be. I haven't seen them, but there must be.
No, I just didn't know if in your sphere if there was,
Yeah, I don't know, but I suspect Ezra will do some form of college. I would have thought. Having said that, the client who I just mentioned, who wasn't in school because she was ill, she wasn't even considered home educated. She just wasn't going to school. She was still registered at school. She is actually doing online school for A levels as well. But I think Ezra she would enjoy going into college. I think it's a different environment, and she'd quite like it. So to be honest, if she were to come out of those groups, it would actually only be for 2 school years anyway.
Yeah.
Which the school year's not even really that long, with all this summer breaks and holidays and
stuff. Always on bleeding holidays. When I've got some stuff that I'm doing at the moment, and I've got to wait 2 weeks to see somebody because of the Easter holidays. I'm like, come on, I'm not getting there now. They're always on holiday. They don't even do anything.
Yeah.
So so your view is a hybrid approach would be the perfect if we were to look into a perfect future for our children, because I despise the school system on a personal level, and obviously you don't have the experience of having your children in there because you've gone and made this amazing path, but your view is a hybrid approach would be beneficial to the growth of children as a whole.
I think so. And before we sign off, I should actually say that flexi schooling is a thing, is permitted.
I didn't know that.
The school has to agree to it, but it's down to the head
so
teacher
hold
of
on.
the
So
school.
state school, I could go to the schools around here and just say, look, she only wants to do 2 days a week, and you can do that.
Yeah. But the head teacher has to agree to it. So not every head teacher is going to agree to that. And I would imagine they're more likely to agree to 3 or 4 days than 2. But yeah,
that would have benefited. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a senior school thing or just a junior school. But
that's interesting. Oh, there's so much to learn about all of this. I think I personally think people should be more inquisitive about, and I think it's made it since the the homeschooling during lockdown. I think it's made it a bit more prevalent, the fact that children can do it, and that it's an option for everyone.
Yeah, the home thing
at different levels.
The thing at lockdown to always remember is that children weren't going anywhere. So it was all at home. Whereas most home educated children are out of the house.
Allowed to leave the house.
Well, most of them are out of the house most of the time. They often have parents in tow, but there's clubs running all day. There'll be sports. There's sports clubs. There's
because I think that was a stigma,
clubs,
wasn't it? It was like, oh, but they're not socialised. They're not socialised. That was the main thing. Home educated kids are just not socialised.
Well,
that was a main thing, wasn't it?
But my experience is they're more socialised, because if you think of the dysfunction of school, you sit in the classroom with the same children next to the same person, all the same age as you, and don't leave that environment. Whereas home educated children are mixing with people of different ages all the time, with different groups of people all the time, in different circumstances all of the time. I think that's a really like ignorant viewpoint. I think it's actually the complete opposite. In fact, the fact that many school kids are just scrolling their phones the entire time, whereas the home educated ones, many of the home educated ones are not. Having said that, there's lots of home educated children who just scroll their phones all the time, and lots that just sit at home gaming all the time. I can't pretend that they're not.
But then there's kids that sit in school on their phones all the time because the teachers can't be bothered to tell them to get off because it's too much of an argument, from what I hear.
And there's schools that don't allow phones, so it's all so different. But I don't think home educated children they're just children like children in school as well.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Good. Home education for the win. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Juliet. Very interesting. Thank you. Until next time, indeed.
Adios.
Together we'll grow, 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 grow. Grow together we'll grow, grow, grow.